They called it a clean bag, which is a strange phrase when you really think about it. Clean bag. As if cleanliness is a category of truth. As if the word itself is a promise. In a hospital, clean is not just not dirty. It's a whole chain of custody. It's a system. It's a contract you sign with your hands. Clean means sealed, tagged, counted, logged. Clean means the bag has been where it's supposed to be and only where it's supposed to be. So when the laundry tech slit the seal and shook out a stack of folded scrubs, neat, warm from the finishing line, smelling faintly of detergent and hot cotton, and something hard clacked against the stainless table, everyone in the room turned their heads at the same time. It was a plastic badge, a hospital ID, scuffed at the edges, lanyard clip broken, photos still intact. Name, Mara Keene. Role, registered nurse. And Mara Keene had been missing for 7 months. The laundry room went quiet in that thick, uncomfortable way, like the building itself was holding its breath. Someone made a joke that didn't land. Someone else muttered, "That's not possible," which people say when something is possible but awful, because a badge doesn't travel on its own. A badge ends up somewhere because a person took it there, or because someone wanted it found. The hospital's security director arrived within minutes, then risk management, then a supervisor from nursing administration whose face looked like it had been carved out of stress, and then, not long after, Detective Lena Hart, because the city didn't have many detectives who understood hospitals, and Lena did. Lena held the badge in a gloved hand and looked at it like it might speak. The badge was clean enough to be convincing, but not clean enough to be innocent. There were faint streaks along one corner like it had been wiped quickly. There was a tiny frayed thread caught in the clip mechanism, a thread the exact pale blue of hospital linen. Lena's first question was simple. Whose bag? The laundry tech swallowed and pointed to a printed tag on the plastic. Unit, Northview Medical Center, Surgical Wing, Linen Exchange. Batch, clean. The tag was correct. The seal looked unbroken until it wasn't, which meant either the badge had somehow made its way through the system without anyone noticing, through sorting, washing, drying, pressing, folding, bagging, sealing, without tearing, melting, jamming, or setting off alarms, or someone had introduced it late. After clean became clean. And that second option made everyone's skin itch, because it implied intent. The hospital had tried very hard to keep Mara's disappearance quiet at first. Hospitals prefer quiet. Quiet is how they keep people calm. Quiet is how they keep donors donating, patients trusting, and administrators sleeping. But Mara wasn't a rumor. She was a person with a schedule, coworkers, a time card, a mother who called and called and called until someone had to answer with something other than, "We're looking into it." Mara had worked nights on the surgical floor. She was the nurse who could talk a nervous family member down without sounding patronizing, the one who remembered patients' preferences and brought extra blankets before they asked, the one who didn't need to announce her competence because it sat on her like a fitted coat. She also had a habit, small, persistent, probably annoying to some, that she documented everything. Not in a paranoid way. In a "I have seen what happens when you don't" way. Medication discrepancies, missing supplies, a patient transfer that didn't match a chart note. She would log it, flag it, follow up. Hospitals need nurses like that, and simultaneously hate nurses like that. It depends on the day. The last day Mara was seen was, on paper, completely ordinary. Night shift ended. Morning shift arrived. Charts were updated. The floor's rhythm changed from dimmed hallway lights and soft voices to a brighter, busier hum. Mara gave report, signed out, and left the unit. Security cameras caught her in the staff corridor, hair pulled back, navy jacket over scrubs, tote bag on one shoulder. She paused at the elevator bank as if deciding whether to go down to the garage or out through the employee entrance. She chose down. She stepped into the service elevator, the one staff used when the main elevators were clogged with visitors and transport beds. The doors closed. The elevator's camera, which should have captured the ride, froze for a few seconds. Not dramatically, not like a horror movie glitch, just a brief, static hiccup that security later described as normal equipment behavior. Then the doors opened. The hallway outside the service elevator was empty. The garage camera didn't show her. The staff entrance camera didn't show her. The street-facing camera on the corner didn't show her. Mara Keene walked into a hospital elevator after a night shift, and then she simply didn't reappear. At first, the unit assumed she'd gone home. Night shift nurses disappear into sleep the way divers disappear underwater. You don't question it. But Mara's phone stayed in the same place on the hospital's network, not moving like a person driving across town. Her mother called and got no answer. Mara missed an afternoon appointment that she'd confirmed the day before. She missed her next shift without calling. Then she missed another. By the time anyone said the words out loud, Mara is missing, the hospital had already started building its own internal story. Maybe she burned out. Maybe she walked away. Maybe she left town. Except Mara's car was still in the garage, not hidden in some corner. Parked in her usual spot on the lower level, backed in neatly, as if she planned to be back within hours. The windshield had a thin, honest layer of garage dust. No signs of a struggle, no shattered glass, no tire marks. Her tote bag was not in the car. Her jacket wasn't in the car. Her badge wasn't in the car. Her keys weren't in the car. And that is where Lena Hart stopped believing in the easy theories. Because people who walk away don't typically leave their car in a paid staff garage with their personal things gone, but their life otherwise intact. They don't vanish in a place with cameras unless someone understands those cameras. The hospital cooperated, but with the cautious cooperation of an institution that thinks in liabilities. They provided footage, they provided logs, they provided statements that sounded polished, like someone in communications had smoothed the edges. Lena talked to Mara's coworkers. Night shift people are different. They're tired in a way that makes them blunt. They told Lena Mara had been off lately, but not in the way administrators love to imply. Not flaky, not unstable. Off like she'd noticed something and it stuck to her. One nurse described Mara staring at a supply cart one night as if it offended her personally. She kept saying the counts were wrong, the nurse said. Not like we're out of gauze. Like the numbers don't match. Like someone's been pulling stuff without charting it. Lena asked what stuff. The nurse shrugged. Narcotics get tracked. That's tight. But there are other things. Things you can move without an immediate alarm. Sterile packs, certain meds, patient label rolls. You'd be surprised what people can reroute. Reroute. The hospital word for theft when you don't want to say theft. Lena asked if Mara reported anything formally. The charge nurse hesitated, then said Mara had filed an incident note 2 weeks before she vanished. Not a major one. A small discrepancy. But she'd attached details. Times. Locations. The kind of detail that turns a small discrepancy into a bigger problem. Lena requested that report. Risk management delayed, then produced a version with sections redacted, citing patient privacy. Lena didn't care about the patients. She cared about the pattern. She pushed until she got enough to see the shape. Mara had flagged repeated irregularities tied to a specific corridor, the service hallway that ran behind the surgical wing, connecting supply storage, the linen chute access door, and the service elevator. The same elevator she entered on her last shift. That corridor in older hospitals is where the building's bones show. Pipes, utility panels, doors with signs nobody reads. And if you know the building, you know which doors lead to nothing and which doors lead to places the public never sees. Lena walked that corridor with a facility supervisor named Dean, a man with a ring of keys that looked like it belonged to a medieval jailer. Dean kept calling it unremarkable. That was a problem. Unremarkable places are where people hide. The service elevator sat there like a gray mouth. Next to it, a laundry staging door marked linen only. Nearby, a utility closet. And further down, an access door with a faded sign. Tunnel authorized personnel. Dean said it was a service tunnel connecting to an older part of the campus, used mainly for moving supplies without crossing patient areas. He said it was locked. He said few people had access. Lena asked for the access list. Dean looked uncomfortable and said access lists were handled by security. Security said access lists were handled by facilities. Lena stared at them and said, "So nobody's responsible. Convenient." That's when the hospital's veneer started to crack, because there were other small things that didn't fit. A security guard remembered seeing Mara near the service elevator earlier in the night, talking quietly with someone in a dark jacket. He couldn't describe the person well. He thought it might have been a transport worker or a contractor. He didn't report it because it wasn't an incident. A housekeeping employee mentioned the linen chute had jammed twice that week, like something bulky was being forced through. Maintenance cleared it, annoyed, and then it jammed again. A supply clerk said a particular kind of sterile pack kept disappearing, and she'd stopped bringing it up because her supervisor told her she was being dramatic. Hospitals are full of people trained to minimize their instincts. It keeps the machine running. It also creates blind spots the size of trucks. Lena's team searched the service tunnel. It was long, echoing, concrete-lined. It smelled faintly of damp and bleach. There were side doors with old labels. A few were sealed shut. A few were functional, but dusty. The tunnel connected to a loading area where deliveries came in. Food, supplies, linen. Linen. Laundry is one of those systems people forget, but it is constant. It moves through everything. It touches every patient and every unit and every floor. It has its own routes, its own elevators, its own doors. It is the bloodstream of fabric. And that's why Lena hated it. Because if you wanted to move something through a hospital without attracting attention, you didn't carry it under bright lights. You put it in linen. You hide it in plain sight. The hospital laundry wasn't fully on site. The hospital had a small internal laundry room for emergencies, but the bulk linen was handled by an outside contractor facility. Dirty linen went out in carts. Clean linen came back sealed in bags, tagged by unit. The system was designed to prevent contamination and ensure accountability. But systems are only as honest as the people touching them. Lena interviewed the laundry contractor's driver routes. She checked truck arrival logs. She checked CCTV at the loading dock. She found something that made her pause. On the morning Mara vanished, there was an unscheduled short stop at the dock. A van, not the usual linen truck, had been allowed into the service lane. The driver's badge was scanned, but the badge belonged to a subcontractor whose paperwork had since been misfiled. Misfiled again, another word. The van stayed only long enough to load 2 linen carts and leave. 2 carts that were logged as overflow. Overflow means no one double checks. Overflow means it's not unusual. Overflow means a story you can tell without raising eyebrows. The police tried to locate the van. The plate was partially visible but smeared by glare. They chased it anyway. It went nowhere fast. Weeks became months. Mara's mother, Judith, began doing what families of missing people do when institutions move too slowly. She became a pressure system. She called the hospital board. She contacted local news. She stood outside the employee entrance with a sign that said, "Find Mara," in thick, black letters, because she didn't know what else to write that would cut through bureaucratic fog. Nurses quietly supported her. Some left flowers. Some honked when they drove past. Some avoided her because they couldn't handle the guilt of walking into work while someone else didn't get to walk out. The hospital responded with statements. The police continued investigating, and the case publicly entered that gray place where people stop expecting updates until the clean bag. 7 months after Mara vanished, a sealed bag of clean scrubs arrived at the surgical wing linen exchange. The tag was correct. The seal looked intact. The scrubs inside were pressed and folded in the neat rectangles you only get from industrial finishing lines, and inside that bag was Mara's ID badge. This didn't feel like a random discovery. It felt like a message. It felt like someone had waited until attention drifted, until exhaustion set in, until the building's alarms quieted down, and then dropped a single object into the system like a pebble into still water. Lena's first move was to freeze the laundry chain. She pulled the bag's tracking number. She traced it to the contractor facility. She demanded the CCTV from the bagging station. The contractor produced footage. It showed the bag being filled with scrubs. It showed a worker folding, stacking, sliding them into the bag. It showed the bag sealed, no badge visible, but the camera angle didn't show the inside of the bag after the last stack went in. It didn't show hands reaching in afterward. It didn't show the bag's side seam where something small could be slipped. There was a gap, a blind spot, not huge, just enough. Lena asked who worked that station that day. The contractor listed 2 employees, 1 full-time, 1 temp. The temp's name was listed as pending verification, pending verification. Yet another phrase that made Lena want to throw a chair. She went to the contractor facility in person. She walked the floor. She watched how bags moved from folding stations to sealing to palletizing to loading. She noticed how easy it was, if you were familiar, to add something to a bag after sealing by cutting a tiny slit and reapplying a heat strip. Done cleanly, it would look original. It would fool most people, especially if they weren't looking for foul play. Lena asked to see the bag itself. The hospital had stored it carefully. The bag was opened along the official seam, but under bright light, Lena saw a second seam line, faint, slightly irregular, as if the bag had been reheated and resealed. Someone had tampered with it, so the badge didn't turn up. It had been planted. The obvious question was why? Why plant a badge in a clean bag? To tell the public, she's dead, stop looking? To tell the police, look at laundry, not at us? to tell the hospital, you missed something and I can still touch your systems. All three were possible, and all three were terrifying in different ways. Lena returned to Northview and re-examined the last place Mara was clearly seen. The service elevator corridor. The hospital's elevator camera footage had always been frustrating. Grainy, inconsistent, briefly glitched. Lena ordered a forensic review of the system logs, not the footage. The logs, when cameras rebooted, when recorders dropped, when power flickered, a technician found something subtle but damning. On the morning Mara vanished, the service elevator camera didn't glitch. It was manually rebooted. A reboot that required access to the security closet on the same floor. A closet whose access list, mysteriously, had never been provided cleanly. Lena demanded that list again, and this time she was not polite about it. She got names, facilities, supervisors, security managers, 2 contractors, 1 IT technician, and 1 name that made her pause because it was too neat, too connected. Dean, the facilities supervisor with the medieval keyring. Dean, who'd called the corridor unremarkable. Dean, who'd pointed out the tunnel door like it was a non-issue. Dean, who'd been in charge of clearing linen chute jams the week before Mara vanished. Lena didn't accuse Dean. Accusations get people to shut down. She asked questions. She asked about shifts. She asked about who had tunnel keys. She asked about the linen chute access. Dean answered with the confidence of someone who thought he was untouchable. He also answered too fast. When Lena asked if anyone could enter the tunnel from the corridor without going through the main tunnel door, Dean said no. Then Lena asked about the old dumbwaiter shaft. Dean blinked. That blink was the first real crack. Northview was an older hospital built in phases, wings added, corridors rerouted, old utility shafts sealed off and forgotten. Lena had learned years ago that buildings remember their secrets, even when people pretend they don't. The hospital had an old service shaft once used for linen transport before modern systems replaced it. It was supposed to be sealed. But supposed to is not the same as is. Lena brought in a structural inspector. They traced the shaft lines through blueprints and walked the physical spaces where it should have been inaccessible. They found a wall panel in a storage room behind the surgical wing, painted to match, cluttered with carts in front of it, effectively invisible. The panel wasn't on the updated maps. It was on the old ones. Facilities said it was sealed decades ago. Lena looked at the screws. They were not decades old. The panel was removed. Behind it was a narrow opening leading into a dead service corridor, dust thick enough to show footprints. The air smelled faintly of detergent and wet cloth, the smell of linen that has been moved and stored and forgotten. The corridor led to a small room, a staging room, a place where carts could be parked out of sight. And in that room, tucked behind a stack of old broken plastic bins, they found a detail that made the hair on Lena's arms rise. A heat-sealing strip, the same type used to reseal clean laundry bags. The police photographed it, bagged it. Lena didn't tell the hospital staff immediately. She didn't want the building to start cleaning itself. Buildings do that when they panic. She also didn't tell Mara's mother yet because hope is a delicate thing. And this wasn't hope. This was direction. They searched the dead corridor and adjacent spaces with a careful team. No body, no dramatic discovery. Just evidence of use. Fresh scuffs, a dropped glove, a crumpled contractor tag that didn't match any registered vendor. And then they found something else. In a utility drawer, taped to the underside like someone wanted it hidden but retrievable, there was a folded page ripped from a notepad. It was written in neat, determined handwriting. Not a diary, not a love note, not a confession, a list, inventory codes, dates written as words, not numbers. A note that read, "Do not route through main dock. Use linen. Use overflow." Lena showed it to Mara's closest coworker. The coworker's face went white. "That's her handwriting," she said. Mara had found something. She had started tracking it. And then she disappeared in the corridor that connected supply, linen, elevator, and tunnel. Now the case wasn't only a missing person, it was a pattern. A theft ring, smuggling, drug diversion, something using hospital infrastructure as cover. Hospitals are obsessed with controlled substances and compliance, yes, but they're also full of items that move quietly. Specialty meds, high-value supplies, identity credentials, even patient label materials. Anything that can be misused can be moved, and linen touches everything. Lena started looking at staff who had access and motive. Not personal motive, system motive. Who benefits from blind spots staying blind. She pulled shift overlaps. She pulled contractor schedules. She pulled badge access records to the tunnel door, the security closet, the linen chute access. Dean's badge appeared more often than it should, at times that didn't match official work orders. He had access, he had knowledge, he had control over unremarkable spaces. When Lena brought Dean in for a second interview, she didn't mention the hidden corridor yet. She mentioned the badge. Mara's badge was planted, Lena said. Someone resealed a clean bag. That requires equipment. It requires familiarity. Dean's expression tightened. He tried to shrug, but his shoulders lifted too high. Lena kept her voice calm. "People think hospitals are the safest places in the city," she said. "So they don't watch the back corridors. They don't watch laundry. They don't watch service shafts. The perfect place for someone who likes to work unseen." Dean stared at the table. He didn't confess. People like Dean rarely confess. They bargain with silence. But after that interview, something happened that confirmed Lena's instincts. Someone tried to access the dead corridor again. A motion sensor the team had quietly installed triggered late at night. Security responded, found the panel slightly ajar, and no one inside. Just a smell of detergent, fresh and sharp, as if someone had recently passed through holding clean linen. Lena understood the message. Someone was still moving inside the system. Someone had noticed the police were close, and someone was trying to erase. The next days were a controlled sprint. Lena coordinated with internal affairs, hospital compliance, and a federal diversion unit that specialized in medical supply theft. They didn't announce it. They didn't schedule it like a normal audit. They did it quietly, like you do when you think the culprit is watching. They monitored the loading docks. They monitored the linen carts. They tracked overflow routes. They found an irregularity, a set of linen carts labeled for a unit that had not requested them. The carts were lighter than they should be. The seal tags were correct, but the weight was wrong. They followed the carts. They watched them move through the service tunnel route instead of the main corridors, and in the dead corridor staging room, they finally saw the mechanism. A worker in contractor gear arrived with a key, opened the hidden panel, rolled the carts inside, and then, from within the dead corridor, another person appeared. Someone who moved like they belonged, someone not wearing contractor gear. Dean. He didn't look surprised to be there. He looked practiced. The team moved in. The confrontation was not a dramatic fight. It wasn't a movie. It was a man caught in the wrong hallway with the wrong keys. Dean tried to talk his way out. He tried to call it routine. He tried to blame contractors. He tried to claim he was inspecting. Lena held up a photo of Mara's badge in the clean bag. "Why plant it?" she asked. Dean's face hardened, and that, honestly, was the moment Lena realized something she didn't want to realize. This wasn't only about theft. This was about control. Mara had seen the system. She had written it down. She had threatened simply by being thorough to expose it. So they removed her. But removal doesn't always mean what people fear first. Sometimes it means someone is trapped somewhere the building can hide. Lena ordered a full search of the tunnel lines and sealed rooms tied to the dead corridor. This time they brought in trained search teams and structural experts. They checked spaces that were legally and physically difficult, sealed utility rooms, decommissioned storage areas, old service shafts, and behind a locked interior door, deep in a sealed wing that used to be an auxiliary recovery ward decades ago, they found signs of habitation. Not comfortable habitation, not someone lives here. Something else. Something temporary. A blanket. A water bottle. A cheap flashlight. A stack of folded linen like a makeshift pillow. And a strip of duct tape on the wall where someone had scratched letters into the adhesive with something sharp. Mara. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a diary. It was what you do when you need the world to know you were real. The hospital went into emergency protocol mode. Police flooded the tunnel area. Administrators tried to control access. Security tried to control information. News vans arrived by afternoon because hospitals cannot hide that kind of thing once sirens show up. Mara herself wasn't there when they entered the room, but the evidence of her presence was fresh enough to change everything. She had been held, moved through linen corridors, hidden in the hospital's blind organs. The badge in the clean bag wasn't a random clue. It was a distraction, a timed reset, a way to make everyone stare at laundry while the real mechanism stayed hidden. Lena's team expanded beyond Dean, because Dean was a node, not necessarily the whole network. They arrested the contractor who had been moving carts. They seized phones. They pulled messages. They found references to clean bags and overflow and quiet routes. They also found something else. One message that made Lena's stomach twist. She wrote it down. Another message. Put the badge back in clean. Make it end. It wasn't poetic. It was operational, which was worse. In the weeks that followed, the case became less about one missing nurse and more about what the hospital had allowed to exist behind its polite front hallways. The board launched internal investigations. Compliance teams swarmed. Staff were interviewed. Policies were rewritten, as if rewriting a policy could undo what had happened. Mara's mother, Judith, didn't care about policies. She cared about her daughter. Lena told Judith only what she could. The badge was planted, the hospital's systems were compromised, and there was strong evidence Mara had been held on site. Judith's face did something complicated. Hope and horror braided together. "Is she alive?" Judith asked. Lena didn't lie. She didn't promise. "I don't know," she said. "But someone went to effort. People don't go to that kind of effort for nothing. We keep looking." And that was the truth, thin but solid, because the clean bag proved something that mattered more than any rumor. It proved Mara's disappearance wasn't a personal decision, not a quiet burnout, not a woman walking away. It proved someone touched the system months later and placed her identity back into it like a calling card. It proved there were people who believed they owned the hospital's blind spots, and the moment the badge hit the stainless table with that small plastic clack, the blind spots stopped being blind. Clean, it turned out, wasn't a promise. It was a lie someone had been relying on. Now it was a lie the city was finally tearing open.